Let me tell you about a kid, only 15 years. Eddie Obrien, caught in the gears. Political pawns, they played their game. Power and money all in his name. But was tight with will, no simple fate. Climbed the ladder, sealed Eddie's state. Wayne but a prosecutor with a purpose. In the court of politics, none could touch us. This ain't just a story, it's a legacy. Eddie was the stone that shaped their destiny. With every connection, every hand they shake, Eddie's case became the ground they break. Riley and Bud, best friends since youth, built a law firm, they spun the truth. When Riley took the case, he was never alone. Built on foundations, powerfully grown. With the Budwell network, they made a show. Charlie Baker in the mix, he's part of the flow. All linked together, climbing the heights. On Eddie's back, they rose to new sights. This ain't just a story, it's a legacy. Eddie was the stone that shaped their destiny. With every connection, every hand they shake, Eddie's case became the ground they break. Kimberly Budd, her name now in lights. Chief Justice of the court in the highest of fights. Calls Riley godfather, mentor, uncle too. Let that sink in deep. Eddie's pain paid through. Judge Heffernan ruled fair, you played your part. But the pressure came down like a storm in the dark. It wasn't about truth, wasn't about rights. It was all about power and their political heights. This ain't just a story, it's a legacy. Eddie was the stone that shaped their destiny. With every connection, every hand they shake, Eddie's case became the ground they break. Eddie got used by a system so cruel. A pawn on the chessboard, they played him as a fool. So remember his name, let it echo, let it be free. Eddie till it's backwards. Fight for the right, you see. Can we keep it real timeless? Let the truth ignite. We don't bend, we don't break. We will stand for the light.
But we in here, we getting ready, few things I'm doing, man. Just enjoy the time, share this, like it. Little boy from Somerville, let's get into Eddie O'Brien. Shout out to Eddie. Shout out to everybody holding it down. Yes, salute, appreciate it. Boy, thank you the other day, standing on your square. Appreciate everybody. I'll be right back.
Just a boy from Somerville, caught in the storm, innocence shattered in a world so torn. They said it was fear, reopening the doors, filled with whispers behind closed floors. A white boy convicted made it look fair, but in the shadow of justice, the truth laid bare. Eddie was a name, but just a pawn in the game. Sacrificed and railroaded, nothing felt the same. Oh, just a boy from Somerville. They played with his life as if it was a thrill. Politics and pressure, shadows at play. Innocent hearts lost in this twisted ballet. Barnum was under pressure, he folded like glass. The DA showboating, just trying to amass. The system wanted justice, but justice was blind, changing the laws, leaving truth far behind. Remove the judge who dared to be just. Eddie was demonized in the world's cruel thrust. Size mattered not when politics run deep. From day one he fought, but all they did was sweep. And those inside knew the story was wrong. We could have done better, sang the old wrong song. Experts pressure to twist the
get some shamrocks to Eddie Obrien.
In the court of despair, there was no charm. He never stood a chance from the very start. A tragic confession, a broken heart. Watch Eddie's face when the world turned cold. An innocent spirit caught in a tale retold. The system failed him, that much is clear. A boy from Somerville, lost in his fear. Yet in the ashes, his story remains of the justice betrayed and the bitter pains. Through the lens of history, we sing his plight. Remember the boy who stood up to the night. Just a boy from Somerville. They played with his life as if it was a thrill. Politics and pressure, shadows at play. Innocent hearts lost in this twisted ballet. So let's tell this story, raise voices, unite. For every Eddie, let's stand up and fight. Just a boy from Somerville, forever will stand in the hearts of the people. His truth in our hands.
Hey, yes. Shout out to everybody. Shout out to the shows. I think it's not. The people. It's definitely a whole platform dedicated. What's up, my free Eddie Obrien people? You know, because this space over here, we already know what this is. Just for grown folks, for thinkers, for people who want clarity, who want truth, accountability, conversation that doesn't require a helmet and a waiver. What's up, everybody? How we doing today? How's everybody? Took a day off yesterday. Wasn't intended. Long day. Shout out to Margo Nash. Go pick up her book, The Politics of Murder. And you might hear me say that with an S, only for YouTube guidelines. But today, we're stepping into chapter 4 of Margo Nash's book. And listen, this chapter right here, this is where the story stops being a courtroom drama, you know, and starts looking like a political chess match. You know, and the mods, they clearly know what to do. Oh, and if anybody, some housekeeping, if any of the mods see Mr. AO, Audio T's, block him, please. Block Audi if you see him. But this is where, you know, we stop talking about the story for a minute, you know, in the courtroom. And we start, you know, it's like a political chess match, where these pieces are already moving around before Eddie even sat at the table. You know, I think this chapter right here is going to introduce somebody who wasn't holding a knife, that wasn't at the crime scene. You know, she wasn't even in a courtroom, but somehow I think this chapter has more influence on the Eddie Obrien fate than half the people who were. And her name is Gina Mahony. Salute and respect to Gina, you know. And if you don't know who she is, you know, we're going to try to help you understand why her shadow, you know, is all over this case. And we call it a shadow because the district attorney made Gina Mahony a shadow. Gina wasn't a cop. You know what I mean? She wasn't a prosecutor. She wasn't a judge. She wasn't even a witness. Somebody who was with the victim the last 10 hours of her life, and she wasn't even a witness. She was a political operative, behind the scenes. They did not want to talk to Gina. They didn't want to interview her, just like Virginia Reckley. Wait, it was a while later before Virginia was interviewed. As we found out in the last chapter. Good morning, Joseph. How you doing? Aunt Jerry, shout out to you. True Crime in the house, working behind the scenes today. Patricia White, how you doing? Jojo plus True Crime, absolutely. Good morning, Mr. Brill. How's the new job coming along? She's healing. She's in the healing process. She is in a healing process. And if we think about great 3-hour ride to Maine, loving it. Oh boy, be careful. And Maine DOTs are no joke out there.
Absolutely.
Good morning, Mama Obi. Aunt Jerry's in the chat. Patricia, True Crime, Jay Brill. But we're talking about chapter 4 today in Gina's book. And I would think everybody should go grab a copy of this. You can go on Amazon. I actually put the links. They'll scream across the top of the page. If you give me a minute. There it is. There it is. And because I'm not looking at the chat, if AO pops up, please delete him ASAP. This is a bolo alert.
I'll be on the lookout for the mail. Thank you. The t-shirt's coming.
But chapter 4, I think, lays out something that Margo Nash has been hitting since page 1. The case wasn't just about guilt. It wasn't about innocence, right? It was about power. And all this week, we've been talking about Riley, little evil Riley. It was about who could look tough on crime. Riley seen this as a way that he could sit in the governor's chair, but an out-of-towner came along named Patrick Duvall and said, no, not today. But they didn't want to score points. Of course they did. They wanted to climb their ladder, right? Who could turn a tragedy into a talking point? And we discussed the 10 cases that Riley had a chance to sit on, but didn't. We could talk about the 7 unsolved, but it was Janet Downing that Riley, said she deserves my all. What she did, no one else did. Okay. But you can go back and check that out. I think that was a very good episode. He didn't want the truth, and we already know he didn't want the facts. Jojo, my other son. I love that. He didn't want the truth. He didn't want facts. No evidence. Because when she's feeling better, man, appreciate it. Absolutely, man. See, we all caring over here. Great people. You know, but I think when politics got involved, when you get politics over prosecution, we seen what happened in the Karen Reed case. Brennan, you know what I mean? Shitty prosecutor, but he may be the defense attorney that you want, you know, defense attorney that's willing to do whatever he had to do. But a defense attorney's job and a prosecutor, absolutely, JoJo. Absolutely. The prosecutor's job and a defense attorney, two different things. The book is amazing. Can't wait for the second one. I can't wait for the next book. That's what I'm talking about. You know, but let's keep it real, right? Because when political people get involved in criminal cases, right, the defendant stops being a person and he becomes a prop all the way from the other side. Welcome, Brenny Woods, you know, coming from a whole country. There's people in another country standing up for Eddie Obrien. But Eddie Obrien wasn't treated like a boy. He wasn't treated like a kid. He wasn't even treated like a suspect. Adult suspects were getting more loyalty from the prosecutor than Eddie Obrien was. And that rang loud. They were already talking about it in lockup before Eddie even got there. So Eddie wasn't treated like somebody that even had rights. Where was his rights? Margo Nash even said, I don't think anything I could have done could have protected Eddie. Nothing was protecting Eddie. The judge couldn't protect Eddie. The court couldn't protect Eddie. The truth couldn't protect Eddie. Eddie wasn't treated with somebody with rights. He was a headline that could be shaped into a weapon. And he was shaped into a weapon. And Gina's involvement. How long was it until they even spoke with Miss Gina? But this wasn't an accident. It's not a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. It was a political machine. They saw an opportunity, and Eddie Obrien, a 15-year-old boy, became their sacrifice. Now, there is an uncomfortable question, I think, after chapter 4, how many other cases have been influenced the same way? How many never stood a chance? And how many families was fighting a battle that they didn't even know was rigged? How many cases were rigged? And the Karen Reed case, that shows us that it's possible. So the Gina Mahony chapter, we're going to get into this. Give me a second. Hit the like button. Everyone salute. Be safe. You too, J Bro. Be safe out there driving, out in Maine. But give me a minute. We'll be right back.
Courtroom lights, truth's gonna bend. Heffernan standing tall, trying to defend. Said it looked bad on paper, but it's all deeper. Politics lurking, call it a grim reaper. Eddie was just a kid, caught in the fray. But the power players had a game to play. From day one, they wanted him to fall. A kid in the spotlight, crushed by it all. Heffernan knew the truth. No, it ain't fair. Politics behind the scenes. justice wasn't blind. It was a political bet. Dr. Bonham was chosen, thought he would be right, a face of fairness in that long dark night. But the DA smiled wide, played both sides slick. Heffernan thought neutral, but maybe that's the trick. Eddie's fate sealed with a stroke of a pen. My ruling was sound, but the world turned again. They needed him guilty to fit their plan, change the laws mid-game. Oh, what a scam! Heffernan knew the truth. No, it ain't fair. Politics behind the scenes, no one would care. Guilty or innocent, the verdict was set. Justice wasn't blind, it was a political bet. Juvenile court, he should have stayed there. 20 years, not a slap, but no one would care. System in panic cause he stood his ground, but the wheels of justice just turned him around. They wanted Eddie down, they wanted him lost. With the stakes so high, he paid the cost. Heffernan's truth rang clear in the dark. Tried to bring light, but it missed the mark. Eddie, a kid caught in a game, lost in the shuffle, society's shame. So here's a lesson carved deep as stone: justice shouldn't wear a political tone. Heffernan stood firm, knew it wasn't just. In a world focused on power, who can you trust? Heffernan knew the truth. No, it ain't fair. Politics behind the scenes, no one would care. Guilty or innocent, the verdict was set. Justice wasn't blind, it was a political bet. So let's remember as the story unfolds, the tales of the innocent, the truth yet told. Heffernan knew the truth, and it cuts like a knife in the courtroom of power. Yeah. Let me tell you about a kid, only 15 years. Eddie Obrien, caught in the gears. Political pawns, they played their game. Power and money all in his name. But was tight with will, no simple fate. Climbed the ladder, sealed Eddie's state. Wayne, but a prosecutor with a purpose. In the court of politics, none could touch us. This ain't just a story, it's a legacy. Eddie was the stone that shaped their destiny. With every connection, every hand they shake, Eddie's case became the ground they break. Riley and Bud, best friends since youth, built a law firm, they spun the truth. When Riley took the case, he was never alone. Built on foundations, powerfully grown. With the Budwell network, they made a show.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Salute, salute, everybody. We back. We're going to get into the Gina Mahony story. Everyone got good sound. Can you hear me? It's all good, right? All right, now, at the top of the page, you can go to Amazon.com. You know, I think Wild Blue Press as well.com, you know, or at your local bookseller, you know, which I would rather everyone go to their local bookstore and order it. You know, if you go to your bookstore, I think Amazon gets like 40% off the top, you know, so go to your local bookstore. But on your way there, watch out for deer, you know, and order Margo Nash's book. And also, see if you could reserve the new book that's going to be coming out. I seen a moose once. I was up at Franconia Notch, like where the man on the mountain was, and I was leaving Robert Frost's house. I sat on his porch, at the same porch that he would do a lot of his writing. Boy, I stuck out like a sore thumb in that town. They knew. They said, this boy is not from around here. No, I wasn't. But let's get into the book. It's very peaceful. Yes, it is. Nature is definitely peaceful. But let's get into this, and then we'll go over some comments. If there's any super chats, we'll get to them after. Let me put the comments on stage. Go over here, take care of these. So many things that you have to do. So YouTube sees that you're doing everything you're supposed to do. Chat. It's definitely free Eddie every day. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people, when Eddie comes home, he'll probably trying to do the same thing, be an advocate, get him a job, get him working. All right, let's get into this. Chapter 4, Gina Mahony. Seeing all the commotion at the Downing house, Gina Mahony immediately thought there must be a crisis with Kerry. I went out the front door and saw several emergency vehicles parked around Janet's house. She explained, I assumed that her daughter Kerry had come by and they were in a confrontation. This was a frequent event when Kerry was there, and Janet's way to handle it was to call the police. My temper flared. I wondered why Kerry was in like a shelter with her baby, so there must have been a lot of issues between Janet and her daughter Kerry, because it must take a lot for a mom. It must take a lot for a mom to make her daughter sleep in a shelter. So yeah, there had to always be a lot of drama there. All right, let's continue. My temper flared, and I decided that with all of the other problems Janet had told me about, I would go over and lay it into Kerry right now. And Gina's a little spitfire, so I could picture that. I walked past the policeman standing on Janet's walkway and went into the foyer. I could see the EMTs working on Janet, and I couldn't see Kerry anywhere around. So when I went back out, Mahony said she returned to her porch to watch what was happening. She was there only a minute when she saw Adi Ortiz walking from Hamlet Street towards her porch. He looked, she reported, as fresh as a daisy. Everyone else was wilted from the humid summer heat. But Ortiz, he looked like he just stepped out of a cool shower with wet and freshly combed hair. Ortiz told her that his dispatcher had radioed him and said that his sister-in-law had been murdered. Mahony wondered how he could have known that when Downing was still inside the home with the EMTs. Mahony saw Ortiz's green cab parked the wrong way on Hamlet Street besides the Downing's backyard, facing the bottom of the hill on the left side of the street instead of the right side. She noticed that it was blocked in by a fire engine, a cop car, and an ambulance, which meant that Ortiz had been parked there before the first responders even arrived. Makes sense, because that was a parking spot somebody would have grabbed. Let me bring it back on my page. Ortiz asked if he could use the phone to call his wife, Janet's sister, Mahoney's daughter went inside to get it for him. He stepped off the porch and was leaning against the car on the curb. He turned back to us and announced, "Well, she's officially dead." He handed me back the phone and reached into his pocket. Then he started patting himself down, looking in the pockets, and kept saying, "Oh shit." Then he shouted that he lost his keys and he had to find them right now. He took off at a run across the street towards Janet's house. The police had begun to put yellow tape around the property. Audie was searching around the back and sides of the cab. Then he sprinted across Janet's lawn, and a cop stopped him. He told the cop that he lost his keys and wanted to go in the backyard of the house and look for them. The cop told him that he couldn't come beyond the tape until it was removed. The cop also told him that if his keys were found, they would be returned to him. Imagine that. Yeah, if we find your keys on his crime scene, buddy, here you go. We'll give them right back to you. Boy, what a shitty fucking cop. What a shitty police department. I gotta say, I'm sorry. Thank you, Aunt Jerry, for the $4.99. Free Eddie, well appreciated. Imagine that. Imagine putting your keys, losing them on a crime scene, and you're frantic. The officer don't notice, like, what is your keys doing here to begin with? That's not something like, this is as bad as the Strongville Police Department. Mahoney wondered how could he have known when the EMTs were still inside. Yeah, Gina was a little firecracker. She was like, "I'm gonna go over there right now," and she felt like she was gonna rough up Kerry. So the police had begun to put the yellow tape around the property. Audie was searching around the back and the sides of the cab. He then sprinted across Janet's lawn, and a cop stopped him. He told the cop he lost his keys, wanted to go in the backyard of the house and look for them. The cop told him that he couldn't come beyond the tape until it was removed. The cop also told him that if his keys were found, they would be returned to him. Audie came back, and he was saying he had to find those keys now. He asked me if I thought that the police would be leaving soon, and I explained that I thought that the procedure would be to leave a cop on the site and keep people from getting in past the tape. Maybe not in Somerville. Audie was very upset and said that he needed to get over there to look for his keys, and he couldn't leave them behind. He again went across the street and asked the cop if he could search for his keys. But he came back to my house and said that the cop wouldn't let him go into the backyard and look for the keys. He asked to use the phone again to call the company to have the cab towed away. A few minutes later, Jessica Obrien, Eddie's 12-year-old sister, comes running out the Obrien house calling for her father. Mahoney told her he was inside the Downing house. Mahoney went with Jessica to the Downing house and asked one of the cops, "Can you get Big Ed?" Even the name Big Ed is an understatement. I just got off the phone with Eddie, and he thanks everyone for the support and loves it. Keep him focused. Absolutely, man. Free Eddie. We appreciate that. And I'll get back to most of the comments in a minute. Jessica told her father, "Little Ed got hurt. He just called from midnight." Mahoney returned to her house. She later found out that her daughter had been up in her bedroom smoking a joint with Ortiz. Imagine Audie up there smoking with a little girl, little 16-year-old. Shame on you. Eventually, Ortiz's cab was towed. Ortiz remained around the crime scene for hours afterwards. Like, Really? Don't you think you want to get going with your damn cab? He was frantic about having lost his keys. He kept commenting on what trouble he was going to be in for losing them over there, wrote Mahony in her recollection. To me, I don't think it was because you already had the car towed. They have extra copies of the keys. So why are you frantic? Unless, shit, my keys were dropped on a crime scene.
I need to take a shower.
I remember saying that it probably was a common happening that they would just duplicate keys at the dispatch office. He just said, "You don't understand. This is really bad. I'm fucked." As the hours passed, Paul Downing and Gina O'Brien returned from Revere Beach. Janet's ex-husband, Paul, also arrived, as did Erin and Carrie Ann, their two daughters. Mahony sat on the curb and held young Paul in her lap while he cried and cried. His father was also crying. None of what Downing told Mahony on the last day of her life would ever be heard by a jury. Similarity, what Ortiz told Mahony about Downing being murdered and officially dead now, on how he had managed to lose his keys in Downing's backyard, would not be disclosed to the jury in Eddie's trial. More shit that was held out of the jury. A lot of stuff that would have helped Eddie was kept out of the trial. A lot of stuff that would have helped Eddie was kept out. All of these statements were deemed inadmissible hearsay by Judge James McDaniels, a former Middlesex County Assistant District Attorney who presided over the trial. Hearsay is considered unreliable in terms of proof because there's no opportunity to cross-examine the person who actually said the words. There are many exceptions to the hearsay rule, but only one ineffective attempt to get this testimony in. One of those exceptions was made by the defense. No detectives, investigators would testify about what Downing told Mahony that day because the CPAC investigators refused to interview Mahony. How do you not interview her? See, when they say, "Oh, all truth and nothing but the truth," is a lie. Her information would not appear in any police reports or narratives of the investigation into this murder. When the Somerville police first came to Mahony's house on Monday morning, the day after Downing's murder, they asked only two questions. When was the last time you saw Janet? And when did she leave your house? Mahony made it clear that she had additional information, but the police said that was all they needed because the additional information would not fit the Commonwealth's agenda. They don't fit the DA's agenda, the CPAC unit, Riley's agenda, Bud's agenda. They don't fit nobody's agenda. How is she not a star witness for his defense? Absolutely. Come on now. So if you're just joining us, we're getting into, Margo Nash's book, Politics of Schmurda. I appreciate everybody joining us. Big shout out to the chat, everyone that holds us down on a daily basis. We're just trying to get a man free. You know what I mean? Trying to get a man that was treated like a headline for so many years free. Give me a minute, y'all. We'll be right back.
Network, they made a show. Charlie Baker in the mix. He's part of the flow. All linked together, climbing the heights. On Eddie's back, they rose to new sights. This ain't just a story. It's a legacy. Eddie was a stone that shaped their destiny. With every connection, every hand they shake, Eddie's case became the ground they break. Kimberly Budd, her name now in lights. Chief Justice of the court in the highest of fights. Calls Riley godfather, mentor, uncle too. Let that sink in deep. Betty's pain paved through. Judge Heffernan ruled fair, you played your part. But the pressure came down like a storm in the dark. It wasn't about truth, wasn't about rights. It was all about power and their political heights. This ain't just a story, it's a legacy. Eddie was the stone that shaped their destiny. With every connection, every hand they shake, Eddie's case became the ground they break. Eddie got used by a system so cruel. A pawn on the chessboard, they played him as a fool. So remember his name, let it echo, let it be free. Eddie till it's backwards. Fight for the right you see. Can we keep it real time? 15 years old, life in a flash. Eddie O'Brien's dreams turned to ash. Caught in a storm of political lies. Justice was blind, just heard the cries. In 95, when the law turned cold, a tale of the super predator, truth untold. The DA's game, playing with fate, manipulated minds, sealing Eddie's slate. Oh, Eddie, hold on tight. We're dancing for the truth tonight. Break the chains, let the world see. Your voice is strong, it's time to be free. Justice for Eddie, justice for all. We'll rise together, we'll never fall. Exculpatory truths left on the shelf.
Shout out to Margo Nash, man. That song dedicated to Margo Nash. Go pick up that book right away. You know, salute to Margo Nash. We just getting caught up. I haven't even went over the chat, and I promise I will. Let's see, where were we? I'll just start here. Oh, no detectives or investigators would testify about the Downing told Mahony that day. Because the CPAC investigators refused to interview Mahony, her information would not appear in any police report or narratives of the investigation into the murder. When the Somerville police first came to Mahony's house on Monday morning, the day followed Downing's murder, they asked only two questions. When was the last time you saw Janet? And when did she leave your house? Mahony made it clear she had additional information, but the police did not want any of that at that time. The DA, the CPAC unit, and the Somerville police had already decided who had committed this crime. They believed they had their bad guy and weren't interested considering alternate perpetrators. When investigators discovered that Eddie Obrien had a cut on his hand and had been taken to the Somerville hospital that Sunday night, they didn't believe him. When he said that he'd been mugged in Union Square, they immediately connected Downing's murder with Eddie's lacerated hand. Local and state police arrived at the hospital and asked the nurse to swab a small drop of blood from Eddie's right hand. Now, the note, Judge James McDaniel was the head of the Civil Rights Division while working at the district attorney's office and supervised a young ADA named Thomas Riley. Keep that in mind. A motion to recuse the judge was filed and argued by Eddie O'Brien's attorney and denied by Judge McDaniels. So Eddie said his father were brought to the police station that night and questioned at length. Eddie's clothes and sneakers were seized. His fingerprints were taken. Early Monday morning, Eddie was released into his father's custody, but it was clear that he was a suspect. He would be formally arrested in the slaying one day later. Seasoned homicide detectives say that the worst mistake investigators can make is to focus too quickly on one suspect. And that's what McGill said. You know, McGill said, like, you never stop investigating. You know, they stopped investigating too soon. Over the course of the next year, Mahony repeatedly called the Detective Bureau to say that she wanted to tell them what Downing has said on the day she died. Each time, Mahony was told that the detectives had all the information they needed about Downing. Eventually, Mahony just stopped calling the police altogether. And that basically ends chapter 4. Boy, that was interesting, huh? I mean, that's not justice. You know, and I think, you know, why does this matter today? I think because this wasn't an accident, what happened. Shout out to 2 Cents, man. Appreciate all your support. This wasn't a misunderstanding. You know, I think this shit was all intentional. A political machine saw the opportunity, you know what I mean? And they sacrificed Eddie. So we're going to continue in a minute. We're going to get into chapter 5. I'm sorry. And chapter 5 is the Eddie Obrien chapter. You know, so we're going to get into the Eddie Obrien chapter. You know, but we all got to stand tall. Free Eddie. Rule 30 motion coming up soon. You know, and hopefully the court is going to hear the argument, which I don't see why they wouldn't, but you never know. You know, so that was the Gina Mahony chapter, you know, and the chapter where, you know, the mask slips off and you could see the machine. You could see somebody said like the political donut was in the making. And this is why we read this book, right? This is why we break it down, because the truth doesn't just live in the evidence. You know what I mean? Sometimes it lives in the shadows behind the evidence that the jury never got a lot of chance to hear. You know, and the next episode, we're going to go deeper. You know, if chapter 4 showed us politics, chapter 5 might show us the course. I didn't even get up and go to work last night. I was so tired. But shout out to the chat, the mods, the members, everybody who pulls up, you know, and keeps this conversation going. You know, y'all are the reason this story keeps breathing, you know, and I appreciate that. You know, I definitely appreciate that. Listen, we ain't going nowhere. We're going to get into chapter 5, but you just got to give me a second, you know, to handle something. You know, but shout out to all the mods. And again, anyone sees AO, block his ass forever. Please.
Absolutely.
You got my permission. You know, but we'll be right back. Oh, big shout out to 2 Cents for the $19.99. You know, Shamrock's in the chat for Eddie, man. We're going to jam away right now. Give me a minute. We'll be right back.
Behind closed floors, a white boy convicted made it look fair. sacrificed and railroaded. Nothing felt the same. Oh, just a boy from Somerville. They played with his life as if it was a thrill. Politics and pressure, shadows at play, innocent hearts lost in this twisted ballet. Barnum was under pressure, he folded like glass. The DA showboating, just trying to amass. The system wanted justice, but justice was blind, changing the laws, leaving truth far behind. Remove the judge who dared to be just. Eddie was demonized in the world's cruel thrust. Size mattered not when politics run deep. From day one he fought, but all they did was sweep. Oh, just a boy from Somerville. They played with his life as if it was a thrill. Politics and pressure, shadows at play, innocent hearts lost in this twisted ballet. And those inside knew the story was wrong. We could have done better, sang the old wrong song. Experts pressure to twist the truth arm in the court of despair. There was no charm, he never stood a chance. From the very start, a tragic confession, a broken heart. Watch Eddie's face when the world turned cold. An innocent spirit caught in a tale retold. The system failed him, that much is clear. A boy from Somerville, lost in his fear. Yet in the ashes, his story remains of the justice betrayed and the bitter pains. Through the lens of history, we sing his plight. Remember the boy who stood up to the night. Just a boy from Somerville. They played with his life as if it was a thrill. Politics and pressure, shadows at play, innocent hearts lost in this twisted ballet. So let's tell his story, raise voices, unite. For every Eddie, let's stand up and fight. Just a boy from Somerville, forever we'll stand in the heart of the people. His truth in our hands.
Hey, we back. How you doing, Free Bird? Welcome, Free Bird, back. I made it. Eddie is innocent. DNA is the proof. Free Eddie until it's backwards. Eddie is free. Absolutely. I'll definitely get to a lot of the messages we have in the chat. You know, I want to shout out to Aunt Jerry. Thank you. 2 cents, standing up for Eddie. I was thinking, son, when Margo Nash, since we're talking about the Margo Nash book, we're up to chapter 4, going into chapter 5. But I was thinking, when Margo Nash first walked into the courtroom, the first time that she had to go to the Somerville District Court to see Eddie Obrien, when she walks in, she's thinking, they've been saying that this kid's a monster. You know what I mean? He's a super predator. But that wasn't what Margo Nash seen. The way she explained it, I didn't see a monster. I didn't see a super predator. I seen a kid who looked like he should have been at JV practice, not in a jail cell. And them jail cells are cold, they're raunchy, they're ugly. Ugly places to be. But she said he didn't talk like a street kid. He didn't act like a street kid. Eddie didn't even curse. He was a mature, sheltered, and honestly a scared little boy, man. But now, flip the script, right? Flip the script of what Riley's thinking about Eddie Obrien, right? Riley looks at that same kid and sees what? A future serial killer. Not maybe troubled, not maybe involved, not. Riley knew all these things weren't true that he was thinking, trying to convince himself. No, he jumped straight to this kid is a ticking time bomb. Well, that time bomb is still ticking, right? Allegedly. We heard people testify. We heard people tell us stand-up guys. Any stand-up guy that I spoke with from Rhode Island or Massachusetts, let's not forget, two states, they have one world, basically. There's a lot of people that knew both places, and any stand-up guy that I spoke with that knew Eddie Obrien had nothing but stand-up things to say about Eddie. Stand-up things, not negative things, stand-up things. Like Eddie prevented more tragedies in prison than the system did. Eddie stopped more problems. And if one of Eddie's people was hooked on the junk, they stayed away from Eddie. Because Eddie was going to, give him a nice talking to, like, stay away from that stuff, So Eddie was, and that's what everybody inside the system says. Everyone in the system says that about Eddie, or any stand-up guy that I know that got transferred out to Mass. Riley looked at this kid, so you got Margo Nash. She's seen him one way, and Riley sees him a different way. Same kid, two completely different worlds. So now let's talk about the night that Janet was killed, right? Because this is where the split screen gets even crazier. Nash, Margo, Eddie goes to check into his friend's home. A lot of people say, why was Eddie there? Why did Eddie go over there? Why was he in the house? Well, Eddie went over there. He sees the door open. All right, that's unusual. Let me go see if my boy's home. So he goes to check the door. He goes in, hello. Janet's on the floor. He don't know what happened. Maybe she fell. Bumped her head. Who knows? Right? So Janet's on the floor. He kneels down to help her. Who knows if he got a little bit of blood here or there, but he kneels down to help her, and we hear all that in the Amatol test, which some known it as the truth serum. You hear the Amatol test saying, did you hurt Janet? No. Did you kill her? No. You ain't lying under that shit. Hitler used to use that. Like, you are not lying under that stuff. But you are not walking away from a brutal crime like that clean. Unless you wasn't the one doing the crime. But Riley's version, Eddie was tormenting Janet, moving things around her house. She wakes up, catches him, and he executes her? Nah, come on now. First he's putting in a Snow White movie, and next thing you know, I think I'm going to go across the street and whack my neighbor. And the word he uses was execute? Come on, Riley. No history of violence, no motive, right? no beef with them, but somehow Eddie snaps and becomes a ninja-level assassin with zero blood on him that's scaling, 8-foot chain-link fences the same time he's at Midnight Variety. Really? A change of clothes, you would have got blood on you. You would have got even when you eat a meatball sandwich and you're so careful, like all of a sudden you see a little tiny dot that you almost don't see to the blind eye on you. You would have definitely got blood on you. So we have two crimes, two stories, I'm sorry. Same crime scene, two different universes. It's like impossible for this to happen. The DNA evidence, I go over that with you. The 3 different columns of DNA. I broke it down as easy as I can for even the average person to understand. But you don't test anybody else. Why? So I think here's where Nash ends up dropping the bomb. She said this wasn't just a murder case. This was politics. This was the era of the super predator panic. Politicians were out here trying to look tough on juvenile crime. And Eddie became the perfect poster child for this, the perfect one. So Margo says investigators got tunnel vision. They ignored the leads, ignored the brother-in-law who Janet was terrified of, ignored the exculpatory DNA evidence, the blood samples that never made it to the trial. How does the investigator take blood samples at the hospital, and from the hospital they go right back to the crime scene? But that makes sense. But Nash, she has sat down with 39 boxes and files and said, whoa, none of this even adds up. Now look at the human side. Eddie wasn't just some hardened criminal. He wasn't part of no big gangs. A 15-year-old boy. He wasn't some street legend. He was a kid who lost his childhood in one night. And you know what bothered him? That these pieces of crap wouldn't even let him mourn his best friend's mother. Imagine that. Wouldn't even let him mourn his best friend's mom. He saw an opportunity. But when the system decides who you are before the evidence even hits the table, you don't even stand a chance at that point. You don't even stand a chance.
Eddie Obrien, oh what a story to tell. 15 years young, caught in a prison cell, trapped in the system. Ain't that just a shame? For a crime he didn't do, they played him like a game. Pattern so clear, yet nobody sees. Intentional lies blowing in the breeze. Documented truths, but they're buried so deep. Poor kid lost his life while the system's asleep. Free Eddie, free him till it's backward. Guilty on paper, but he never had the hard facts. Let a fool think he won, that's how it goes. Eddie's innocence buried beneath all the woes. The man couldn't keep his own story straight.
taking the kid's future. Ain't that real fate? Welcome back, chat got us talking hood-wise. Dark humor and metaphors disguised in the cries. Sir, hypothetically, in a murder case, ain't it funny how a fool runs this rat race? Growth don't happen in the middle of this mess. Step back, breathe, man, just let go of the stress. Free Eddie, free him till it's backward. Guilty on paper, but he never had the hard facts. Let a fool think he won, that's how it goes. Eddie's innocence buried beneath all the woes. See, you gotta let the clowns believe they succeeded. You didn't fold a break, you just got what you needed. Took it to the chin, not the heart, you see. Don't let the chaos take space in your melody. You're built different, like a lesson they missed. Teaching them boundaries, couldn't find them on a list. Drowning in a puddle, they dragged you below. But now you let them flounder, cause they reap what they sow. So here's to Eddie, just as long overdue. Fighting for the truth like we all have to do. Step back from the noise, watch him throw a fit. Free Eddie Obrien, let's never forget this. Eddie Obrien, oh what a story to tell. Fighting for his life in this unjust hell. Free him till it's backward. Guilty on paper, but he never had the hard facts. Let a fool think he won, that's how it goes. Eddie's innocence buried beneath all the woes.
All right, there we are. We back, everybody. Welcome. Yeah, thank you. I seen what JFK said. I'll read that in a little while. I just want to concentrate on getting all this off, and but appreciate everybody that's joining in. How we doing? Big shout out to Aunt Jerry over there. Big shout out to Freebird, because Eddie has been seen nearby with a certain time frame. Investigators immediately treated him as the primary target rather than a routine local witness. Investigate. DNA. That's how Gina explains it. If we zoomed out for a second, because what happened to Eddie Obrien didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in a moment, a political freaking moment, when the whole country was losing its mind over the idea of these super predators that never existed. Because the man that came up with the whole super predator thing, and if you need me to break that down, let me know, and we'll do another episode just on the super predator stuff, where it came from, how it started, the man that started the super predator language, and he recanted on it. He said, yo, my bad, you're bad. They changed laws behind this shit. They changed laws behind this stuff. And if you weren't around back then, or you forgot, let me break it down in English. Somebody that was, even though I was an adult by then, but I was affected by that, because they weren't just locking up juveniles, they were locking up everybody. And what they do, they left all the addicts on the street. They left all the addicts on the street to raise these kids. And then you wonder why 20, 30 years later, you got demons everywhere running around. But back in the early 90s, politicians wasn't out here telling the people that a wave of violent, remorseless kids are coming. Kids with no conscience, kids who were supposedly going to take over the street. And Eddie Obrien was in that group of kids. Eddie Obrien was going to take over the streets? Come on. Wait a minute, I got to answer the door real quick. But yeah, Eddie Obrien wasn't going to take over. Wait a minute, I got to go answer the front door.
Eddie Obrien,
Oh, what a story to tell. 15 years young, caught in a prison cell. Trapped in the system, ain't that just a shame? For a crime he didn't do, they played him like a game. Pattern so clear, yet nobody sees. Intentional lies blowing in the breeze. Documented truths, but they're buried so deep. Poor kid lost his life while the system's asleep. Free Eddie, free him till it's backward. Guilty on paper, but he never had the hard facts. Let a fool think he won, that's how it goes. Eddie's innocence buried beneath all the woes. The man couldn't keep his own story straight. Taking the kid's future, ain't that real fate? Welcome back, chat, got us talking hood.
There we are. We back now. Like I was saying, if you wasn't around back then, you don't really, it's hard to really understand. But back early in the 90s, politicians were out here telling the public that a wave of violent kids were coming. Oh, we need to build more prisons. You build them, we will fill them. And that's what was going on. We got more kids. We have more kids that are in, we have more adults in the United States in prison than college universities. Is that crazy? There's more kids in prison than college universities. We have more people incarcerated in America than I think every country combined. So Riley was easy to get the public terrified. So what did lawmakers do? They didn't slow down. They didn't ask questions. They didn't look at data. They changed the laws, made it easier to try kids as adults. They pushed for life sentences. They treated these 14 and 15-year-olds like grown criminals. And in Massachusetts, the person steering that ship was Billy Weld, had a big hand in it. They put a battery in Eddie's back and he was charged. See, this wasn't just policy. It was a campaign. It was a friggin' political movement that was built on fear. And the more you read into this, you could see how it was a political movement built on fear. And Eddie Obrien got caught right in the middle of it. And Margo mentions it in her book, A Larger Agenda, and she is not wrong. Because once the state decided that these kids, these juvenile offenders were the new boogeyman, prosecutors just didn't look for the suspects. They looked for symbols. You know what I mean? And Eddie Obrien fit that symbol. A 15-year-old altar boy. Now he's the symbol for a political movement, and movements need a villain. And the wildest part, right? The whole super predator bullshit, the thing that justified locking kids up for life, has since been declared what? Unconstitutional, right? Wow, imagine that. So if that was unconstitutional, discredited, debunked, thrown out, but Eddie Obrien, he's still living with the consequences, of a panic, or consequences of a system that admits it was wrong. But you won't admit you were wrong with Eddie. And Margo goes on to explain this is why they had tunnel vision. This is why they have tunnel vision. So we're going to get back into, the Margo Nash book. If you want me to continue, let me know. I'm going to check out the comments in just a second. I lost a page of the book, and then we'll get into the book. We'll go comments, and then the book. And after the Eddie Obrien chapter, jumps right into Adi Ortiz chapter. Okay, got my piece, so let me go back here. The system can book whoever they want. That's why we have to help out our fellow brothers and sisters who are wrongfully put in prison. I like it. 2 cents exactly. That will tell the real story of who did it. And Freebird, that's what I'm saying. If my mom had her killer's DNA under her fingernails, I'd want to know who matches that DNA. It's a third party. Investigate. That's what I'm saying. Like, if there's a mustard seed, you know what the scripture says? If there's a mustard seed of a chance, wouldn't you want to know? A lot of people say it's Eddie. But wouldn't you want to know if there's a chance that it's someone else? Janet Downing knew who it was. That's why she banged her hand on her fist. She sat in front of her car that day. She sat in her car. Many a time she didn't want to go in her own house.
That's because she didn't like what was going on in her house. Might as well check the mail.
I mean, yes, absolutely. Miss Patricia White. How sad they never listened to Gina. Poor Janet knew something bad was coming, not from Eddie. Why the 5 cabbies blocking Janet's car? Jay Brill, hope you have a great trip. And then when you eventually relocate, they will be lucky to have you down there uncovering the corruption. Or maybe they'll kick you back up north. I would not stop until that was done. Like, what the F? And don't forget, Marge, you see anything inappropriate, get it out of there. We had such great mods, a great chat, great community. Hey, thank you, Big Ed, with the $9.99. Thank you, everybody. Back at you. We all appreciate Big Ed. Oh, absolutely. Like you said, it can be fixed. Most things are fixable as long as you use your words. There you go. I believe Bob George messed up with the Gina's testimony, saying Janice said that 2 weeks prior to the crime when she actually said it that day. Ed O'Brien, True Crime Tree says, "We got you, Papa.
Mama.
We got you, Papa and Mama." I had Robert Judge for a play case, and he pled me out. Well, we know Robert Judge was into his own problems at that point, so we don't know how much the state had on Robert Judge. But we do know Robert Judge almost beat Eddie to prison. You know, Robert George almost beat Eddie in there. Absolutely, Patricia, right? The mods are already on guard duty. They're gonna snipe them as soon as it bang, boom. When you own the media and the mass Supreme Court along with corrupt politicians, Eddie never stood a chance. We learned that in the Heffernan notes, right? We learned that Margo Nash says it. No matter what I did, I now know I couldn't protect Eddie. The court couldn't protect Eddie. The judge couldn't protect Eddie. The laws couldn't protect Eddie. The evidence could not protect Eddie. But now, here we are 30 years later. You know, we have a great, we have great soldiers marching behind Eddie. They can't hide the truth now.
I want that DNA under her nails.
But we're going to get into it. Chapter Eddie Obrien. Let's go. Just before 9:15 that Sunday night, Eddie closed his bedroom door and walked down to the first floor. On the way, he yelled to his father in the kitchen that he was going to Burger King. Jessica was in the living room watching TV. Papa was in his room. Eddie's mother was at a musical event. Eddie headed across the street to Ryan's house. He was still wearing the same white over-the-rim t-shirt, black sneakers, and green shorts he worn all day. He went up to the Downing house and knocked on the window. As he always did, he heard a loud bang as though something had fallen. He thought he heard someone say, "Help!" The front door was open. He stepped into the small foyer, opening the second door leading to the hallway. The house was dimly lit. Eddie saw blood on the stairs, blood in the front hallway. The bathroom door was closed. He looked to his right and saw Janet lying on her side of the dining room floor. Thinking she had fainted or fallen, he ran over to her, put his hand down, and realized she wasn't conscious. He saw blood all over the floor. He couldn't understand. How could someone get hurt that badly by falling down? Eddie turned Downing over on her back and saw the extent of her injuries. There was blood all over the front of her blouse and cuts on her neck going ear to ear. He saw her eyes half open. She wasn't breathing. That was deep right there. None of us really heard that before. That was deep. Maybe if you want to break that down a little bit. Interesting. Very interesting. He saw blood on the stairs, blood in the hallway. The bathroom door was closed. Traumatic, absolutely. People pay attention, man. It was going to get a lot deeper. He looked to his right and saw Janet lying on her side of the dining room floor. Thinking she had fainted or fallen, he runs over there. Now think about Eddie's motions. Kneeling down. I think it had we showed the description. I think Jay Bro was in the house, actually took video of it. Eddie shook her and called her name. Nothing happened. And he stood up to run out the front door for help. That was when he saw a tall man. Now, Eddie's tall. Think about that. And Eddie's describing, I seen a tall man with dark hair and dark clothes standing in front of the door. The man moved into the hallway, stepped up to Eddie and said, "Close the door." He had a knife and held it up to Eddie's throat. Eddie reached back and closed the inside front door. He didn't realize the voice. Then the man grabbed him by the arm and said, "If you say anything, I'll kill you and your family." and I'll have time before the police even catch me. Now get the fuck out of here. Eddie tried to see who he was, but he couldn't make out his features. The man was wearing a nylon stocking over his face, with a tear on the left side close to his ear. He was wearing like surgical gloves. Eddie reported to Dr. Paul Spears, a clinical neuropsychologist, in an interview with the defense expert back in 1995. There was a knock on the front door. Time seemed to stop. Now, that's like, if you think about it, you put your hands on somebody you love, like not hands to hurt them, but, you're in bed being intimate, and time goes by so fast. And LL Cool J played a small part in the movie, and he mentioned that, you put your hands on a beautiful woman, and time goes by so fast, but you put your fingers on a hot pan, and it feels like it's been there forever. Relativity. Things like that just stuck with me. And Eddie said, time has stopped. There was a knock on the front door. Eddie ran past the dining room, past Downing, apparently lifeless body, and into the kitchen, grabbed a knot on the cellar door, and pulled the door open. He couldn't bring himself to look back. He worried that the guy might leave by the front door as he went down the basement stairs. He flew down the steep cellar stairs and hit the pillar at the bottom. There was laundry hanging on lines in the damp basement. He pushed his way past it and headed for the door to the backyard. It was wide open and he ran out. The door was always closed. A couple of years ago, Janet put on like a bolt on the door because her younger daughter's boyfriend used to break in the house and sleep downstairs. So she put the bolt on and the bolt was open. He does remember hitting the bushes outside and falling into them, but he doesn't remember any pain or feeling scratched by the sticker bushes. He remembered not wanting to go directly to the right out the door onto Hamlet Street because the guy might have been there. So he went through the bushes in the back. Eddie made his way to the sidewalk on Hamlet and heard voices calling him, determined to get away from the man inside the house. And the memory of seeing Ryan's mother lying in a pool of blood, he headed down Hamlet Street towards Highland Avenue. He was terrified. He couldn't think. He'd never been so scared in his life. He never seen anyone seriously injured, let alone stabbed. Eddie completely believed that the man would harm him and his family if he told anybody what he just seen. He never considered calling the police. He was afraid even to tell his parents. His whole family would have to move someplace else, go into hiding. He could tell nobody because he had to protect his family. What Eddie really wanted was to go back to his house and start all over again at 9:15. I put the 9:15 in there. He wanted to pretend that none of this had happened. He wished he'd gone swimming. He wished he'd gone over to Gavi's house. His heart was beating out of his chest, and he didn't know what to do or where to go. Eddie felt trapped, frozen, and alone. Wow. Imagine what was going through Eddie's head at that time. Unbelievable. Let's catch up with some of these comments. Thank you, everybody, for the support. And if you believe in Eddie, please share this. I'll wait. Share it right now. Hit the like button. We will wait for you to get back. Go do it now. We'll wait. We will definitely wait for you to get back. Hit that like button. Matter of fact, hit that like button so hard and leave that DNA on it. And hype these videos. You get 3 hypes a day. Hype the video, please. It's like going to the comments, you slide over, it says hype this video, and that's how the video gets around. Shout out to the mod Rando. Mr. Obrien, thank you always for the support. And Freebird with the muscles, absolutely. This is unacceptable. They framed him. Big facts, big facts. Freebird said, profound question about the predetermined legal path and the potential for police to ignore contradictory evidence in favor of the fast, sensational arrest. And we might go over some of Riley's notes right after this. Thank you a lot, Patricia White. 3 hype this week. I always use mine early in the week. They reset on Mondays. Appreciate everybody. Yeah, hype the video. Hype it. We always appreciate, that hype button. All right, I'll be right back, people. Don't go nowhere, man. Keep rolling for Eddie Obrien all day.
Breaking through the darkness, piercing the shroud. 30 years in chains, but the truth won't die. Unseal the past, let it rise high. Unseal the notes, expose all the blocks. Rayleigh trapped Eddie in a manufactured box. 30 years of hidden facts buried in the track. It is time to give Eddie Obrien his freedom back. Unseal the box, break down the lock. Let the truth ring louder than the courthouse clock. 3 decades of silence, a cold prison shell. Refuse to lie, they cast a wicked spell. No remorse in their eyes, they judge from the booth. But Eddie stands tall, anchored in truth. Summer is opening, the science is real. The manufactured box begins to peel. Voices collide as hope takes its stand. With every heartbeat echoes a drowning band. Eddie's freedom cry, can you hear it loud? Breaking through the darkness, piercing the shroud. 30 years in chains, but the truth won't die. Unseal the past, let Eddie rise The drums roll thunder through the halls of despair. With strings and brass, they unite in the air. A symphony of chaos reflects in the night. The fight for Eddie grows bigger, takes flight. Beneath boundless skies, the walls start to shake. Each note of resistance, a wave in the wake. A revolution of honesty will cut through the lies. As the world turns its gaze, a new dawn will rise. So gather the voices who waited too long for Eddie Obrien. We'll sing out strong. His freedom's a fire, lighting up the gloom. As the massive, triumphant chord brings truth to the room.
Right there. I like that jam, that was inspired by Freebird. Freebird put a lot of work into that song. We got a couple more that we're going to be dropping, but thank you, Freebird, for all your work you did on that. Yes, be free. Be free. Be free, everybody. Free all the guys that should be free. Like I said, don't get it twisted. Prison is needed. Prison is a needed tool, environment. But let's put the people there that belong to be there. But yeah, all love to Freebird. Shout out, what great lyrics. We get the violins in there, the band, the orchestra, had all that and then some. So let's finish this chapter with Eddie, Book time, everybody. Everybody take a place on the rug, cross your legs Indian style.
Go get the coffee cup or tea.
Eddie next remembers going into the Burger King to wash his face. He was sweating profusely. He don't remember his hands being cut at that time. He don't recall any pain in his hand or blood in the sink. He splashed water on his face and tried to think what to do. He told Dr. Spears in 1995, I was in there for about 15, 20 minutes and just thought everything was over. And I couldn't believe what just happened. I washed up a little bit from when I went through, and the wooded area, I had scratches on me. He left Burger King and was on Somerville Ave when he said 2 teenagers suddenly confronted him, demanding his money, and they flashed a knife. He handed over the $17 in his pocket and looked at the kid who did it. Now I'm going to have to cut you because you saw my face, the kid said, and lunged at him. Eddie sideswiped and reached out to shield himself from the knife. It cut his right hand. At least that's when Eddie believes he got cut. The first time he remembers knowing he was even cut was when he went into midnight convenience a few minutes later. As a lawyer or even a layperson, at this point, one has to ask, what are the odds that a 15-year-old kid would see a murder and then get robbed both within a half hour? A zillion to one? Great point. Oh, big interruption here. Eddie Obrien alert. Eddie got off the phone with Eddie. Just got off the phone with Eddie. He sends his best and wanted to thank Mikey and Christina and everyone in the chat that supports him.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, Ed. We're not giving up on you, bro.
I will not give up on you, Eddie the Teddy.
We got you. You know, get closer to that hearing. We'll really start putting on the works, you know? Salute to him. A zillion to one? It's just not believable. A jury would never buy it. Lose this story, Eddie. You will never convince a jury that this happened, I thought. Again, retelling it to me. The same story he told years ago, he says. I wish I could tell you that it didn't happen, that I made it up out of fear. I wish I could tell you absolutely that it was here that my hand got cut, but it didn't happen. And I don't remember actually getting cut by that knife either. I just remember being in complete shock and handing them my money. Take the $17. Eddie reminds me again. He had 20 years. Well, this was 10 years ago, of course, but come up with a story that would be more believable or consistent with the evidence. Yet, in our interviews inside the Souza Borowski Correctional Center in July of 2015, he told the same thing to me that he told to Spires in 95. Don't you think that I could have come up with a better story by now? The only difference I can detect is that he remembers less now than he did then. That's not unusual. Every witness I've re-interviewed remembers less now than 30 years ago. Trauma erases memories. I pressed Eddie about how he cut his hand. If they found traces of your blood at the scene, then you must have gotten cut at Janet's house. Did you grab the knife, Eddie? In reliving those horrific moments with me over 20 years, he lamented. I wish I could just tell you. Yes, I tried to grab his knife. I must have gotten cut. That would so easily explain why and if his DNA was found anywhere in 4 places. In the house, in the front door, the right door jamb, the dining room floor, the wooden post at the bottom of the cellar stairs, and on the pink dress of the laundry line in the basement. But he doesn't remember getting cut in that house. He doesn't remember feeling any pain, and he doesn't remember bleeding. He's had 20 years to come up with a plausible story, but he refuses to say he remembers something that he doesn't, even if it would help his case. How could his blood have been detected at the scene if he didn't get cut there? The only possible explanation to finding his blood in the 4 swab samples are 1, the swabs were contaminated somewhere between the police gathering the evidence, logging them into the evidence, and transporting the swabs to the state police. Forensic lab for blood typing test. 2, the swabs were contaminated during transport from the state police crime lab to Selmark in Maryland. 3, the swabs were contaminated in the state police lab or at Selmark. 4, Eddie's blood was deliberately placed on those swabs to implicate him. And I'm kind of going with 4. They took the blood back to the scene. Imagine that. How is that even allowed? It's like we got a Michael Proctor all over again. And Obrien, I still had nightmares seeing Janet like that. Makes me sick. It's something that you will never forget. And it's probably clearer every time. You know, definitely free Eddie till it's backwards. We can't have it no other way. It's just very disturbing They set him up big time, Eddie. Didn't do this framing, disturbing mass court. You know, Big Ed getting a lot of support in the chat. You know, a fan favorite. You know, JoJo, a fan favorite. Freebird, another fan favorite. You know, and it's all the great work you guys are doing. You know, and this goes for everybody in the chat. Patricia White, you know, always here, you know, putting the work in. You know, Freebird, such great help. Great legal mind. Yeah, what can you say about 2 cents, man? Shout out to 2 cents, you know. Right there when we needed him, you know, great guy with the Shamrocks. Hey, True Crime. Where would I be without True Crime? Probably sitting with Eddie. Yes, let Eddie know the love he has. Absolutely, man. Let Eddie know the love he has.
Yeah, what about the
So,
what is it fighting under the bed?
yeah, Carrie Ann's boyfriend hiding under the bed. I guess Ed had posted that in the chat. I mean, absolutely. I don't want to miss anything, so we're definitely going to go over all the stuff in the chat. Yep, Ed O'Brien, we got you. Eddie, 100% innocent. We know the evidence proves it. Yeah, and Ryan did say, I know what they did. They were hiding. But that's for the police to do. We got to get Eddie out. You know, get him home. Free Eddie. Yep, so creepy and lots of weird stuff. Nice work, Freebird. Why the 3-day delay? 721 to 724, collection of blood given to lab. It took 3 days? What were they doing with his blood for 3 days? You know, we're going to go over some of the notes as well, maybe right after this chapter. So let's get back into this. Let's get back into this right now. All of these scenarios would need to be investigated to make sure that the blood evidence found at the scene had not been contaminated, either intentionally or inadvertently. Still, I wanted Eddie to remember every detail, and I became frustrated and annoyed when he said, Margo, I don't remember. Eddie does remember that he ran into Midnight, his safe places, and told them he'd been jumped. He didn't elaborate. Frank, the clerk, dialed the police and handed Eddie the phone. The police and EMTs arrived about 15 minutes later and looked at the cuts on his right hand. There was a cut in the top crease of his pinky finger. Another was located in the fleshy pad on his palm, about an inch under his pinky. Another cut was at the tip of his right thumb, starting at the middle of the thumb and going straight down towards the palm, about half an inch long. His hand wasn't bleeding, and the EMT didn't believe Eddie needed any further medical attention. The Somerville police drove Eddie home. Papa wanted Eddie to go to Somerville Hospital to get a tetanus shot and to be evaluated. While they were there waiting for the doctor to stitch up his hand, the police arrived and asked the nurse to swab a drop of dried blood of Eddie's shin. Eddie recalled this happened before his father even arrived, but he's not 100% sure. No consent or Miranda waiver was signed, Eddie's father didn't object to the swabbing of his son's shin. Of course he didn't. If it helped determine who mugged Eddie, why would he object? The police asked Ed and Eddie to come to the station to be interviewed. Ed was concerned by now that his son was being considered a suspect in a Downing murder, but he was assured that the local and state police were only investigating the mugging. At the station, both Ed and Eddie signed Miranda waivers and cooperated fully. They had nothing to hide. Eddie didn't do anything wrong. Eddie hadn't yet told his parents what he'd seen the night and didn't tell them until 2 weeks after his arrest. He was still fearful of jeopardizing his family's safety. He was sure the police would figure it out. He didn't kill Janet, and they would eventually release him. I bet. We figured out it's all going to be good. We're part of a police family. We have to believe in the justice system. We have to believe in this system. Imagine you got, her boyfriend that would hide under a bed. Come on now. Great question over there at from Ed Obrien, Freebird. Why was it sent to the FBI lab who supposedly sat there for 6 months without it never being tested? Oh, why? Ask why. That's a great question. Why did it sit for 6 months with no investigation? Don't go nowhere, man. We'll be right back. We're gonna get into some more tunes here, to even things out a little bit. Voices in the shadows. Yeah, a little Motown to get you going. I just 30 on a beautiful day. Let's go. don't go nowhere because we ain't going nowhere. I just need to take a quick little break, get a drink, and we'll be right back. Don't go nowhere. We'll get your coffee, tea, whatever you need. That time. Hey, thank you. That was a much needed couple minute break. We back, everybody. We gotta go back and see what's going on in the chat, man. I'm never worried about the checks, and we got some great mods that keep it in order, in line. So yeah, that was chapter 5. We had Ed O'Brien. Thanks so much for the Eddie update and shout out Free Eddie. This is heartbreaking. I can't imagine what they all went through. That's the crazy part. It's all crazy. I mean, it's crazy that his blood was planted and people can't see this. The chain of custody was ridiculous all by itself. You know, the bait and switch. I mean, family. Let me walk you through one of the most calculated, manipulated, flat out unconstitutional moves in this entire case. Because if you want to understand the Eddie Obrien case, you know how he got railroaded. The moment right here is the blueprint. On the night of the crime. Come on, that picks up everything he's just saying. I'm just saying. That's right. You know, kind of like an O.J. Simpson, if the glove don't fit, but if the glove don't fit, you make it fit. You know, on the night of the murder, Eddie wasn't hiding. Eddie wasn't running. Eddie wasn't acting suspicious. He was the victim of a crime on Union Square himself. I know, like Margo Nash said, the odds of what? 1,000,000,000. He was the victim of a mugging in Union Square. He was a 15-year-old kid who got jumped, got robbed, got shooken up. You know, I'm all shook up. Now, any normal prosecutor would say, let's investigate the mugging as well. Let's help this kid. But Tom Riley, he saw something different, right? He saw opportunity. He saw a way to use Eddie's trauma as a Trojan horse. Not what y'all thinking. As a Trojan horse to get inside the house, to get inside the family, to get inside the boy's head. Thank you very much, Aunt G. He saw a way to use Eddie's trauma to get in the house. So if I broke this down in plain English, in Riley's own notes, his scribble, it shows the setup. On one line, he writes that he spoke with Eddie's parents. He said he spoke with Eddie's parents, and they were very cooperative. Why wouldn't they be? Why wouldn't they be cooperative? He even writes the word purpose, right? And that was that purpose. Well, what was that purpose? The police told Eddie's parents that they were doing a follow-up for the Union Square mugging. They pretended they were there to help Eddie. They pretended this was about the crime against him. But at the top of that same page, Riley's notes, Riley is tracking Somerville Hospital, checking for stabbing victims, seeing if any cases connect. So they weren't there to help Eddie. They were there to ambush Eddie. They used the mugging, which was a real documented assault, as a pretext to interrogate a little boy about a homicide. You know? They lied to his parents to get access. They lied about the purpose of their visit. They lied about why they were even there in the first place. And here's the part, right, that should make everybody's stomach just drop. By doing this, they stripped away Eddie's Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. his Sixth Amendment right to counsel. So they didn't get a confession. They didn't get evidence. They didn't get the truth. They got proximity, right? They got access. They got the illusion of cooperation, really, because the family didn't know what they were being set up. They didn't know what they were up against. The O'Briens had no idea. They had faith in the police. They had a father that was top cop #1 in Somerville. You know, this wasn't an interview. It was an ambush, really. It was an ambush dressed up as a concern, right? And that's the peak of deception, I think, in this case. That's where the deception is at its most, right? Not the courtroom, what's going on over there, making it look like theater, not the press conferences. They were impressive. Not the political speeches. You know, I think it was this moment, right, when a scared, injured 15-year-old boy was treated not as a victim, not as a child, but as a target. They all could smell it. A target they were determined to hit, no matter what the Constitution said. What Constitution? What are you talking about, Constitution? Get that shit out of here. They never looked at the family. They should have, especially the family, and I say this with respect, as screwed up as that family. You know, one was living in a shelter, one the boyfriend would hide under the bed. You know, one of them was involved in a male relationship with somebody. No male role models around. The father's out the house. You know, and I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. I'm just saying that just because it has to be said. A violent ex-husband. Absolutely. I witnessed many occasions that Paul Sr. was violent. Why do you think Janet divorced him? Absolutely. And just for that alone should have been reason to check his DNA, to check the blood. Wasn't one of the boys violent with their mom? I mean, I ain't pointing fingers at anybody. I'm just showing what the evidence shows us. What witnesses has shown us. So many other suspects they didn't even bother to look into. We had 7 unsolved before Eddie O'Brien's name was ever even mentioned in any investigations. And they only looked at Eddie. That's all they cared about. That's right. And Freebird brings up a great point that the physical evidence was cross-contaminated before the official labeling. Brings up Karen Reed again, the cross-contamination. Compromised chain of custody. There were so many things that kind of made you say, you know, things that make you go, we should look into that shit. Most families with the dynamic, the police would be looking inward, especially if they happen to be white, in my opinion. Absolutely.
from Somerville, caught in the storm, innocence shattered in a world so torn. They said it was fear, reopening the doors, filled with whispers behind closed floors. A white boy convicted made it look fair, but in the shadow of justice, the truth laid bare. Eddie was a name, but just a pawn in the game, sacrificed and railroaded. Nothing felt the same. Oh, just a boy from Somerville. They played with his life as if it was a thrill.
I think we got it now. I think we have it now. We back. I apologize. Computer just started doing some crazy things. Screens started popping up. But Eddie was photographed at the Somerville Police Department that night. He still had on the same clothes he had on all day. The photos showed that there was no visible blood on them. A white shirt now. No visible blood on a white shirt? Come on. Well, there wasn't. His shirt had a faint, watery blood smear consistent with his hand wound. All these items were later tested by the police. He did have visible scratches over his arm and legs from the sticker bushes. Janet Downing had been stabbed approximately 98 times. Some 66 of these wounds were deep stab wounds, some 4 to 5 inches deep to her chest, torso, back, neck, skull, ears, legs, and arms. The rest were slash wounds on her neck and on her body. Some were long, superficial cuts inflicted deliberately while she was unconscious or dead. Blood was everywhere at the scene. It was visible on the first 5 stairs and walls of the stairway that led up to the bedrooms. It was on the railing, on the hallway walls, on the doors, on the woodwork, in the dining room, and in the kitchen. There was a huge puddle on the dining room floor where Janet laid. Blood drops were in the hallway floor, the kitchen floor. The blood was smeared all the way down both sides of the cellar, stairway, walls. There was blood all over the cellar door, an iron latch leading out the backyard. You don't need to be a forensic expert to understand that it would have been impossible for Eddie to commit that homicide. A homicide that included a struggle that traveled 3 rooms and a flight of stairs and not get a single drop of blood on his white shirt, green shorts, or black sneakers. Not a single drop. Not a single drop. Did you hear that, people? He would have had to fight her 3 rooms. Blood everywhere, wall to wall. Not a single drop. And that's why I think for the people that at this point, after all the evidence that we outlaid, after all the evidence that we put out, if you are not on the free Eddie, then I got to ask you, like, what's up with that? Because the evidence shows that this kid could not have committed this crime. It's no secret. The Downing family has a history of violence. You have no idea of all I know about the Downing family and their violence and runaway daughter. And I can go on and on. And who knows, one day we will know when Eddie's free. And that is the goal here, to free Ed. Because Tom Riley was doing whatever he had to do to get that slam dunk. Shout out to 2 Cents. Whatever he had to do, people. He wanted to sit in the big boy chair, and I don't believe his feet could touch the floor. Love that comment right there. Shout out to 2 Cents, man. I like you more and more. I don't think he could touch the floor. And then they had to bring in Mr. Patrick Duvall. You know, and I know people say, how can you disrespect Janet Down and family like that after everything? I'm not disrespecting Janet or the memory of Janet. I'm just saying that their DNA was a little screwed up. Her brother, I mean, we heard, the brothers in mental facilities. You know what I mean? Wasn't her mom had a history of mental illness? So we're not disrespecting Janet. We're just saying, look, the evidence shows you that there is a history. The key were found in those bushes. Robert, they didn't do anything that was going to hurt their case. They called the night as her best friend did also. Poof, gone. Look at that. Is that a wrench? Did the unforgettable get a wrench? Geraldine, is awful the way so many men just abandoned their responsibilities, like they cast them off to go have fun. They missed out on something so wrong. So wrong. And if y'all could see this, which what I'll do is I'll make it a little. This is actually a image inside the Downing home, and I'll try to get a clear picture of this and get it up there for you. So you don't need to be a forensic expert to understand what it would have been impossible for Eddie to commit that homicide. A homicide that is struggling, traveling 3 rooms, down a flight of stairs, and not get a single drop of blood on his white shirt, green shorts, or black sneakers. And yet the police charged Eddie Obrien with murder on the night of July 25th, 1995. The fact that police found no blood on his clothes, in the creases of his hands, under Eddie Jr.'s fingernails, or on his size 15 sneaker. What, he fly down the stairs? Them are some big ass feet, size 15. The fact that he had no motive to harm his best friend's mother, no consequences. The district attorney could and would fill in those blanks later, reverse profiling, and we went through that already. Congratulations to all the kids that graduated high school. This year, I know we're coming up on the prom season. Just be safe out there. Think of others. Don't do anything foolish. Because now you're going on to be adults, guys. And girls. So, congratulations, man. Since I've been doing the podcasting, it's been nice to watch. This would be my 9th class watching graduate college, go into high school, help kids get into UMass Dartmouth. That's why UMass Dartmouth won 3 consecutive conference championships. Y'all know that? And a couple bowl games too. Yeah, but not anymore. But yeah, so this is not to get off subject, it was just on my mind for a minute. But so why did they rush to arrest Eddie? Why not do a more thorough investigation, seeing that this was a 15-year-old, and we really need to make sure we cross our T's and dot our I's, but we don't want to be wrong here. If we're wrong and we lock up a 15-year-old and we're wrong, they're going to crucify us. And that's why after Eddie's blood, there was no other blood that was tested. No other blood that was tested. And why not a more thorough investigation? After all, Eddie wasn't a flight risk. He was about to enter his sophomore year in high school. His family was firmly entrenched in the local community. There was no need to arrest him less than 48 hours after the murder, before any real investigation had begun. This was no longer a search for the truth. It was a search for the evidence that would convict Eddie Obrien. And that's basically the end of 5. And the next chapter is going to be a good one. The next chapter is Adades J. Ortiz. Adi Ortiz. And too bad blocked because we can't even listen to it or comment. You know, let me go to here. We had a lot of comments today, man. I thank you all, man. I appreciate it. But I don't think it's time to end it, right? Never spoke to him other than the argument I had with him at the grand jury. We never learned who really killed Janet Downing because we're all pretty convinced that it was not Eddie. But I will, just to let you know what this is going to be like. It starts off by Adi Ortiz was the husband of Janet Ortiz, Janet Downing's younger sister. In March of 94, the Ortizes and their toddler AJ moved into the Downing home. Downing and her children reportedly too many friends and neighbors. That couple fought constantly, and that it wasn't a pleasant living environment. So that's what we're going to start off with when we talk about the Adi Ortiz chapter. We'll probably get into that. Maybe tomorrow. Yeah, what do y'all think about everything that we went over today? Riley, I mean, some of his suggestions were just ridiculous. What I get out of all this, his political speaking. I mean, it would have been easier to finger someone other than Obrien. I mean, he had strong community support. His grandfather, what was top cop over there at a point for a long time. But the guy made it work. He's definitely got to be an evil man, to make you do that. An evil person. Evil person. Don't go nowhere, yo. We're not done. We are not done. Eddie wore a size 15. That is huge. A size 14 sneaker. Unbelievable. All right, we back. We back. Okay, we back. We back. How we doing? I talked a couple days ago about Riley's promise that he made in the community about Janet. Like, oh, I'm gonna work on this case, because it's horrible what happened to Janet, and yeah, that kind of got me looking around. Margo Nash brings up a lot of good points. But if we look into the unsolved seven, you know, there was seven that was unsolved, and Riley left that behind. So it got me thinking, did them seven families not deserve your protection? You know, did them seven families, and if we, looked at this for a minute, and first, let me go through the super chats again. Thank you on G. Big shout out to 2 cents for his 1999 free Eddie all day, every day. And Freebird with the 20 spot. Thank you. Always count on Freebird. Ed O'Brien with the 9.99. Thank you, everybody. Freebird doubling back with the 20 spot. Appreciate you, Mikey. Love how you explain everything and keep it real. Thank you for getting the truth of this case out. God bless you and your amazing wife for all you do for Eddie. Absolutely, man. That means a lot to me. It really does. This wasn't about copying anybody or doing anything that anyone else was doing. But this case, I think it needed, it needed more eyes on it. It needed people to break it down and explain it. But before Tom Riley laid eyes on Eddie O'Brien, before, Eddie O'Brien turned 15 years old, an altar boy and a political trophy that Riley thought this apple would be great in my trophy case. And if you listen to what I say, you know why I make the apple analogy. If you don't know, then you don't know. I mean, a high profile case, that has big headlines, a big community shaking story, and right under Riley's watch. You leaving, Jen? All right. Love you.
Love you.
My daughter got to come check up on her dad. Now, she don't care about me. She want to come see her mother. No, she cares. She's a sweet girl.
Love you, Dad.
She texted me yesterday. She said, Dad, I know I don't tell you I love you, but I really do. You're my top dog. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. Some kids just like me. I never learned emotions, so I think I had a hard time teaching my kids to be emotional. Wipe them tears, kid. Put your chin up. What are you doing? Toughen up. Never show emotion. And now my daughter's an adult, and she's hard. You know what I mean? But all the females in my family, I think, are soldiers. The salute to that. But if you look at the seven unsolved, the number one name up there, Deanna Kremen's case, March of '95. 17 years old, strangled, left in an alley, just blocks behind her house in Somerville. Another case that shook the city. Another case that demanded answers. A case that to this day still remains unsolved. and that was Riley's 7, the 7 unsolved. So Riley and his so-called CPAC team, no suspects, no arrest, and this poor girl Deanna never got justice. So that was in March of 95. Right, a few years before that, you got April 4th of 1991. A respected law professor stabbed to death in broad daylight while walking near his home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Again, high profile, terrifying, unsolved. Where's Riley's team? Nothing? So are you telling me, Riley, that they didn't deserve your attention either? Nowhere to be found. The 7 unsolved, right? When you start to look into it, when you start to dig into it, Margo did, city by city, town by town, because Middlesex doesn't keep homicide stats according to what Margo was saying. So you got, I think, 42 towns, 20 or so cities according to Margo's website, and only Cambridge had a complete list. What's going on in Cambridge? Some would say at the time you had a serial killer running around. Not sure how true that is, but during Tom Riley's years at Middlesex DA, from 91 to 99, there were 7 crimes that went unsolved. 6 in Cambridge and 1 in Somerville. 7 families, no answers, bro? No closure on 7 cases? These 7 victims don't deserve justice. I don't know. That's what I guess. That's right. If Tom Riley couldn't solve, if Tom Riley couldn't solve these cases of a teenage girl and a law professor, he couldn't solve 6 murders in Cambridge if he couldn't solve 1 murder in Somerville. So tell me why. Why was Eddie Obrien the one case that all of a sudden this guy thinks he could solve? He couldn't solve his way out of a wet paper bag if it was ripped open. Why this case? Why? Why this kid? Why this moment? You know what I mean? Because Eddie wasn't just a suspect. I think Eddie was their solution. This kid's our answer. And you wonder why the parents are so angry. You're trying to block their kid up for something that he never did, putting them in prison, and you're over here laughing and giggling about your political, what this is going to do for your career. I mean, I don't think anything's funny about any of this stuff. Eddie was their solution. He was their political pressure. He was a solution to getting everybody scared to death. The DA needed a win, right? Okay, there's my ticket. But when you look at the pattern, I don't think it's hard to see what happened. You just heard my car start up all the way outside. Out, right? I'm poor. The car about to die. But Riley couldn't. I mean, with this man, it's just. There we go. That's a little better. I mean, What was I saying? Oh, Riley's a snake. That's right. The political pressure. The fear that Riley put into the neighborhoods. This guy needed a friggin' win. And it's not hard to see what happened. It really isn't. Riley couldn't solve the real killers. So we found a convenient one: a child, a neighbor, somebody young, a boy that walked into a nightmare accidentally, and he's the easiest target in the room. When you get these prosecutors, when they leave 7 people that got away with murder unsolved, but somehow find the time, the energy, the motivation to bulldoze a 15-year-old into a life sentence, I'll say it, excuse my language, that's fucked up. That's straight ignorance. And that exactly is why we are here, so we could pull back the curtain, so we could see what went on behind the scenes, and give a voice to these cases, that would never solve. Because look, 7 cases over there alone. And what about all the cases that were solved? Do they not deserve Riley's best? And that's what kind of tripped me out. And it's great that he says to the Downing family that I'm going to give you my all, but every murder case deserves your all. You had 10 out of 16. Is that a good clearance rate? I don't know. But everyone should get your all. And you shouldn't just settle on the first kid that looks good. You shouldn't just settle on the first apple. Why was this case so different from all the other horrific crimes? Why was this case so different? I mean, he focused on what? The famous one? By choosing something that none of them other cases were? A juvenile. And just at the right time, around the time of the super predator laws. He felt a personal responsibility to the Downing family. I mean, I'm just wondering, did no one else deserve your personal responsibility? Did no one else deserve that? How about all of them victims? Did they deserve it? You told the Downing family, this deserves my personal responsibility. And right away, the first thing I'm thinking, who deserves the DA's personal responsibility? And the other thing I'm thinking, when do we ever see the DA sit in first chair? That don't happen too often. How about Derek Chance, right? Bobby Shickley, Tyrone Phoenix, Rosalie Whalen, names like that. Claire Downing, Trang Fu Ho. Did they not deserve your responsibility? The guy, I mean, so many people, did they not deserve your personal responsibility? Because that's what he's making it sound, right? Who deserves the DA's personal responsibility? I'm sorry. Sometimes my mind just goes blank and I'm just rambling away. But who deserves the DA's personal responsibility? Tom Riley once told a reporter that he felt a personal responsibility for Janet Downing. And it just made me think, so nobody else deserved that? And I start thinking like, wow, no one else deserved your personal responsibility, buddy? Like, come on. Out of all the people, everything that we went through, nobody deserves your personal responsibility. That's crazy. Because pause right there, because if that's the standard, Tom Riley, right? If a victim fighting hard for their life is what earns the district attorney personal involvement, then I got a question. Let me coffee at. That ain't the question, but did the other victims under his watch not fight hard enough? Did the other victims not fight hard enough, Tom Riley, did Deanna Cremens not fight hard enough? So Deanna Cremens didn't deserve the district attorney's personal responsibility? Only Janet Downing deserved your personal responsibility. And like I said, this ain't no disrespect towards Janet. But it's just, did the other victims under his watch not fight hard enough? Is that not a fair question? Did Deanna Cremens not fight hard enough? Did Mary Jo Frug not fight hard enough? Oh, let me guess. Esther Olsofin, right? Maybe she didn't deserve your personal responsibility. Or how about Lila Fagundes? Did they not fight hard enough? And these are questions that you really have to ask, right? There's 7 unsolved victims in Middlesex County during the Little Weasel's watch, right? So what does this say about an elected official? I asked this question the other day, and this stuff really hit. And what does it say about Tom Riley or any elected official? You're sworn in to protect all citizens. You can't pick and choose which victim deserves your personal attention, buddy. And that's the problem with most district attorneys. And which ones do not deserve your personal attention? Who does deserve it, buddy? Because here's the truth, right? Here's the truth. Well, Riley is telling people that he felt a personal responsibility for Janet's death. 7 murders went unsolved under his leadership. 7, 6 in Cambridge alone. And some say there was a serial killer running around. 7 families got silenced. 1 family got the full weight of the DA's office. And you know who that family is? The O'Briens. The full weight of the DA's office, because you didn't investigate all these other 7 families. and a 15-year-old boy became your political vehicle to deliver this shit. What does it all say about Tom Riley and these elected officials who is worthy of your personal attention? Praise God, right? Freebird, have you been sent to us by the angels in heaven? Thank you so much. Oh, Freebird is such a great asset, man. So great. I asked Freebird some legal things. Hey, do you mind if I ask you this or ask you this? Absolutely, she said anything for Eddie. Yeah. And how about pulling a knife out on your wife? Never mind your wife, where her sister was brutally murdered. But the quiet part out loud, right? This wasn't about justice, right? It wasn't about compassion, people. It wasn't even about victims fighting hard. But it's just crazy that a district attorney would say some shit like that. Janet Downing's case gave Riley something the other cases didn't. It gave him a platform. It gave him a spotlight. It gave him a chance to be the face of a new tough on juvenile crime. In Eddie Obrien's case, a 15-year-old boy, an altar boy, became the perfect prop for this agenda. So when Riley says he felt a personal responsibility, what he really, I think, is saying is this is a political opportunity. And that's the part Mass is still paying for. It's the same part that they're paying for. And you have to look at who gets justice and who gets ignored. Who gets justice and who gets ignored. No one in the media ever asked this guy questions, that we would ask him. Why didn't Derek Chance get that promise, Riley? Because you like to parade around. He paraded around his personal promises to the Downing family. He campaigned on it. He told reporters that he felt a personal responsibility to Janet Downing. He told these people that he said that her wounds showed she fought hard for her life. He said her wounds showed she fought hard for her life. But here's the question that nobody is asking. And the question no one asked back then or now. Derek Chance didn't get that promise. Bobby Shiley didn't get that promise. How about Tyrone Phoenix? Tyrone Phoenix didn't get that promise, Riley. Rosalie Whalen didn't get that promise. Helena Gardner. Lawrence Cooper. Trang Po Ho. How about Benny Rosa? Benny Rosa didn't get that promise. So let me guess, their lives are worth less, right? Their families don't deserve closure, right? Oh, let me guess, Riley. They didn't fight hard enough for their lives, right? Oh, let's keep it real. Did their cases not fit the Riley political agenda? Did their cases not fit that? Bang on this.
Yeah. Let me tell you about a kid, only 15 years. Eddie Obrien, caught in the gears. Political pawns, they played their game. Power and money all in his name. But was tight with will, no simple fate. Climbed the ladder, sealed Eddie's state. Wayne but a prosecutor with a purpose. In the court of politics, none could touch us. This ain't just a story, it's a legacy. Eddie was the stone that shaped their destiny. With every connection, every hand they shake, Eddie's case became the ground they break. Riley and Bud, best friends since youth. Built a law firm, they spun the truth. When Riley took the case, he was never alone. Built on foundations, powerfully grown. With the Budwell network, they made a show. Charlie Baker in the mix, he's part of the flow. All linked together, climbing the heights. On Eddie's back, they rose to new sights. This ain't just a story, it's a legacy. Eddie was the stone that shaped their destiny. With every connection, every hand they shake, Eddie's case became the ground they break. Kimberly Budd, her name now in lights. Chief Justice of the court in the highest of fights. Calls Riley godfather, mentor, uncle too. Let that sink in deep, Eddie's pain paid through. Judge Heffernan ruled fair, you played your part. But the pressure came down like a storm in the dark. It wasn't about truth, wasn't about rights. It was all about power and their political heights. This ain't just a story, it's a legacy. Eddie was the stone that shaped their destiny. With every connection, every hand they shake, Eddie's case became the ground they break. Eddie got used by a system so cruel. A pawn on the chessboard, they played him as a fool. So remember his name, let it echo, let it be free. Eddie till it's backwards. Fight for the right you see. Can we keep it real honest? Let the truth ignite. We don't bend, we don't break. We will stand for the light.
Alrighty then. I'm sorry, I just get a little amped up sometimes, you know. Had to bring it down a little bit. Woosah. You know, but their lives, like the guys, the people that I just mentioned, their families, they deserve closure as well. But did they not fight hard enough? That's what Riley was saying. And let's keep it real. Their cases didn't fit Riley's agenda, right? Because here's the truth that they're not going to tell you. Riley didn't personally try any of them cases because there was no reward in it for him. Reward versus consequences. You know, they don't fit the political map. Riley didn't personally try those cases. But if there was, oh yeah, you know, if maybe convicting the men who killed Rosalie Whalen or Claire Downing, there was no headline there, no spotlight there, no tough on crime narrative to ride. You know, nothing to get you to the Attorney General's office there. Nah, them cases don't do nothing for me. But let's be honest. Let's be honest. If the glove don't fit, you make it fit. Because convicting Dennis Whaley for bludgeoning to death his wife with a hammer, that wasn't going to make Tom Riley a star. Convicting Ken Downing for beating his wheelchair-bound wife to death, that wasn't going to launch his political career. Almost. You know, you got a wheelchair story there. The Downing story, I wonder if any relation. You know, domestic violence wasn't part of Riley's platform. You know, it wasn't going to get him where he wanted it to. You know, it wasn't part of the super predator, panic that they were pushing, that they needed to capitalize back in 1995. But juvie crime? Oh, that was a golden ticket. I mean, Riley wasn't trying to reform domestic violence laws. They ain't gonna care about that. Most people in law enforcement were the biggest suspects to domestic violence. Why we want to stop that? He wasn't trying to change, them laws. He wasn't champion for vulnerable women. No. He was trying to change the juvenile laws because that's where I'll get notoriety. And he needed a case big enough. He needed a case that was dramatic. Right? And emotionally, we need a case that's emotional, that's going to push the emotional levels. It's going to rise as you right up. But now you have Eddie Obrien, a 15-year-old boy, an altar boy, a neighbor, carries a kid's bicycle all the way home. A child who walked into a nightmare and became the perfect political pawn. So when Riley says he felt a personal responsibility, right, for Janet, what did he mean by that? That she was the case that could get him elected, that the other cases couldn't. And that's what I want you guys to all remember when we leave today. That he used a 15-year-old boy to get himself elected. Because justice isn't supposed to be selective. And that's what he did with Eddie. And that is not right. Eddie is in prison for over 30 years with no end date. So we're over here all getting our hopes up, thinking all this sounds good, but we are not the ones that are inside the walls. We are not the one that's doing time right now. We're hoping that this is all going good. It looks very, very good. Very good chances, man, but we are not in Eddie's shoes, man. And that's painful just to know that he goes through this. But I'm sure then it puts a smile on his face to know that there's so many people that support him. So many people, man. I was reached out twice today with Eddie calling home, and it made me feel good. It really did. It made me feel real good. But give me a minute. When we come back, we're going to finish up with a closing message, closing monologue. But I'll be right back, people. You already know.
15 years old, life in a flash. Eddie O'Brien's dreams turned to ash. Caught in a storm of political lies. Justice was blind, just heard the cries. In 95, when the law turned cold, a tale of the super predator, truth untold. The DA's game, playing with fate, manipulated minds, sealing Eddie's slate. Oh, Eddie, hold on tight. We're dancing for the truth tonight. Break the chains, let the world see. Your voice is strong, it's time to be free.
exploding in every corner. The whispers of doubt, a system that's rigged. Can't we just shout behind those bars?
Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah, we back, wrapping up. We had a 3-hour joint. We were on here 3 hours, people. Big shout out to 2 Cents. Nothing but support for you and your family, Eddie Obrien. Free Eddie. Absolutely, man. But before we go, I just want to leave you with something simple, something true. This entire case, it forces us to confront something. It forces us because justice isn't supposed to be selective. This is supposed to be black and white. And a district attorney isn't supposed to pick and choose which victims matter. And it's kind of like you have faith in the justice system, and then you're like, damn, well, you can do shit like this. It's crazy because no child, and I know I get emotional at times talking about this, but because we had a 15-year-old boy that's life was robbed from him and should ever be sacrificed to advance his political career. But that is what happened to Eddie Obrien. That's what happened here. And when a prosecutor decides that one family deserves his personal promise, but no one else, while the others got silence, when you pour your entire office into one case, while 7, count them, 7 go unsolved under his watch. And I say that to say this because when you start ignoring shit like domestic violence victims because they don't fit your agenda, that's not justice, man. That's a strategy. That's a dirty, rotten, scoundrel strategy. But the cost of that ambition wasn't paid by the system. The cost of that ambition was paid by Eddie. It wasn't paid by politicians. It wasn't paid by the people who built careers off the fear that you manufactured. Keep it real, kid. It was paid by Eddie. Say it, Eddie. That's right. It was paid by a kid who walked in a house to check on his neighbors when he seen a door left open. It was paid by a kid who walked into a nightmare and became the villain in someone else's story. It was paid by a kid who never got the presumption of friggin' innocence, and it just boils my friggin' blood that there's ignorant people out there with doubts. Eddie never got the protection of the Constitution that he is promised that every person that lives and dies should be able to get. So when we start talking about justice, we talk about the fairness, right? When we talk about the truth, right? When we have to remember this shit and we're back on it, the O'Brien's been in a 30-year nightmare in something that they believed in, that American flag. But when justice only applies to some people, that ain't justice, man. That's depressing. That's scary. That's some bullshit. Justice that can be bent and shaped anytime you want to weaponize it. That's power right there. That's power. But power without accountability will always find a child to blame, right? So as I leave you guys, just remember this. And ladies, a lot of ladies. We're not just telling Eddie O'Brien's story. No, we're exposing a system that failed him. And it's sad. We're exposing a system that failed Eddie. It could fail any one of us. Sometimes we gotta shine a light where others looked away, right? So we're saying the name that we're forgotten. You know, you got to ask the questions that nobody in power would ask. You know, because justice isn't supposed to be selective, people. A district attorney is supposed to pick and choose what victims matter. They'll put a ham sandwich in jail, they don't care. And no child should ever be sacrificed. Ever. Not then, not now, not ever. So my people, much love, man. I'll see y'all later. Stay loud as always. Keep it real. Free Eddie till the dirt. You get it? Got it.
Exculpatory truths left on the shelf. Margo, Nash, revealing the stealth. Turning pages, the story unfolds. The politics of murder, a truth bold, and in every corner, the whispers of doubt. A system that's rigged, can't we just shout? Behind those bars, he's waited too long. An innocent heart, where does he belong? Oh, Eddie, hold on tight. We're dancing for the truth tonight. Break the chains, let the world see. Your voice is strong, it's time to be free. Justice for Eddie, justice for all. We'll rise together, we'll never fall. Reevaluate, we're raising the stakes. Time to uncover the truth for justice's sake. No more suppression, let the voices ring. Together we rise, it's a hell of a thing. We'll sign the petition, take back the night. Fighting for Eddie, we'll win this fight. Oh, Eddie, hold on tight. We're dancing for the truth tonight. Break the chains, let the world see. Your voice is strong, it's time to be free. Justice for Eddie, justice for all. We'll rise together, we'll never fall. More than half a life in a crowded cage, but hope knows no bounds. It's never too late. Hear the rhythm, feel the beat. Justice is coming, can't accept defeat. No more shadows, let the truth shine bright. Eddie Obrien, ready for the fight. So let's light the way with our hearts ablaze. Dance 15 years old, life in a flash. Eddie O'Brien's dreams turned to ash. Caught in a storm of political lies. Justice was blind, just heard the cries. In 95, when the law turned cold, a tale of the super predator, truth untold. The DA's game, playing with fate, manipulated minds, sealing Eddie's slate. Oh, Eddie, hold on tight. We're dancing for the truth tonight. Break the chains, let the world see. Your voice is strong, it's time to be free. Justice for Eddie, justice for all. We'll rise together, we'll never fall. Exculpatory truths left on the shelf. Margo, Nash, revealing the stealth. Turning pages, the story unfolds. The politics of murder, a truth bold, and in every corner, the whispers of doubt. A system that's rigged, can't we just shout? Behind those bars, he's waited too long. An innocent heart, where does he belong? Oh, Eddie, hold on tight. We're dancing for the truth tonight. Break the chains, let the world see. Your voice is strong, it's time to be free. Justice for Eddie, justice for all. We'll rise together, we'll never fall. Reevaluate, we're raising the stakes. Time to uncover the truth for justice's sake. No more suppression, let the voices ring. Together we rise, it's a hell of a thing. We'll sign the petition, take back the night. Fighting for Eddie, we'll win this fight. Oh, Eddie, hold on tight. We're dancing for the truth tonight. Break the chains, let the world see. Your voice is strong, it's time to be free. Justice for Eddie, justice for all. We'll rise together, we'll never fall. More than half a life in a crowded cage, but hope knows no bounds. It's never too late. Hear the rhythm, feel the beat. Justice is coming, can't accept defeat. No more shadows, let the truth shine bright. Eddie O'Brien, ready for the fight. So let's light the way with our hearts ablaze. innocence shattered in a world so torn. They said it was fear reopening the doors, filled with whispers behind closed floors. A white boy convicted made it look fair, but in the shadow of justice the truth laid bare. Eddie was a name, but just a pawn in the game, sacrificed and railroaded. Nothing felt the same. Oh, just a boy from Somerville. They played with his life as if it was a thrill. Politics and pressure, shadows at play, innocent hearts lost in this twisted ballet. Barnum was under pressure, he folded like glass. The DA showboating, just trying to amass. The system wanted justice, but justice was blind, changing the laws, leaving truth far behind. Remove the judge who dared to be just. Eddie was demonized in the world's cruel thrust. Size mattered not when politics run deep. From day one he fought, but all they did was sweep. Oh, just a boy from Somerville. They played with his life as if it was a thrill. Politics and pressure, shadows at play, innocent hearts lost in this twisted ballet. And those inside knew the story was wrong. We could have done better, sang the old wrong song. Experts pressure to twist the truth arm in the court of despair. There was no charm, he never stood a chance. From the very start, a tragic confession, a broken heart. Watch Eddie's face when the world turned cold. An innocent spirit caught in a tale retold. The system failed him, that much is clear. A boy from Somerville, lost in his fear. Yet in the ashes, his story remains of the justice betrayed and the bitter pains. Through the lens of history, we sing his plight. Remember the boy who stood up to the night. Just a boy from Somerville. They played with his life as if it was a thrill. Politics and pressure, shadows at play, innocent hearts lost in this twisted ballet. So let's tell this story, raise voices, unite. For every Eddie, let's stand up and fight. Just a boy from Somerville, forever we'll stand in the heart of the people. His truth in our hands. In the courtroom lights, truth's gonna bend. Heffernan standing tall, trying to defend. Said it looked bad on paper, but it's all deeper. Politics lurking, call it a grim reaper. Eddie was just a kid, caught in the fray, but the power players had a game to play. From day one, they wanted him to fall. A kid in the spotlight, crushed by it all. Heffernan knew the truth. No, it ain't fair. Politics behind the scenes, no one would care. Guilty or innocent, the verdict was set. Justice wasn't